So in class 3 on Monday night, we talked about exceptionalities in the content area. And we broke this down so that there would be 4 tools for success. The first tool is know your students. Number 1, the first thing you need to know is what their prior schooling was. This is really important whenever you're working with students who are coming from different countries, so that you can investigate their school system a little bit, get to know what their content was like, what schooling was like, whether or not schooling was required or not required. Also, just considering students who come from different counties or different states, to look into their curriculum also. I know it sounds painstaking, but it's a really good opportunity for you as a teacher to invest time in getting to know where that student was so that you can start them out where they are and move them forward. The second really important thing for you to know about your students is their L1, which is their first language. So, and again, thinking about students who are ELs, who are learning English, this is very important because you need to know what their language structure and what language transfer issues they may have. So we all know, if we've taken a world language in school, that some languages have alternative ways of putting language together, and that's really important to know as you're preparing your lessons, so that you will recognize when a student is making those language transfer mistakes, and also so that you can work in lessons to help with those language transfer mistakes. The third thing you need to know is trauma. I always question this to try to figure out, has something happened in my students' past that I should know about that's going to help me to be a better teacher to them? Of course, we think about unaccompanied youth with our ELs and the situations that have been at the borders. But in addition to that, like, has there been any other trauma? A lot of times in elementary school, they'll do early childhood development surveys, and in those development surveys they ask parents to give information about any illnesses, any injuries that the student may have had while they were preschool, so that we can know if there was a head injury, if there was something traumatic that happened to the student prior to them coming into schooling that may present itself as a learning issue throughout. And also just kind of considering, like, does our student have, in regards to family structure, do they have both parents? Are they living with aunt, uncle, or grandparents? And we've seen an increase in grandparents taking care of young students. And of course, then we need to know these things so that we can better support that home family life, so we can better support their home learning overall. So these are 4 things that are good to consider as you're trying to get to know your students. The second tool for success is knowing how students are assessed and placed. And of course, we think maybe this is just structural assessments, just basic assessments that they're given through the state, but actually as teachers, we have a ton of advocacy in helping students to be placed correctly, or sometimes boldly, in their upcoming classes. I did present to you here this chart of second language acquisition. So second language acquisition for any student who is an EL works through these 5 stages typically, according to research. So this gives you a better idea of really what you should expect, and keeping in mind that each one of these stages could take at least 6 months in order to complete and to move forward. And any trauma, any setbacks would obviously maybe hold the student back into one of these stages for just a little bit longer. And with ELs, we use something called the WIDA assessment, the WIDA. And WIDA is just a group, a consortium of states that come together to use the same assessment methods in order to determine whether a student needs ESOL support, or when a student should be released from ESOL support. And of course, then we have some special ed and IEP service testing. So for those of you that are going into special education and have special education background, you will know about the Woodcock-Johnson, which is just an achievement test that helps us to figure out an IQ, a base IQ for a student. On the bilingual side of that is the Woodcock-Munoz, does the same thing. It's a little bit more nonverbal for our students, so that language isn't a barrier as they're going through. And again, this is given bilingually, so we always have bilingual interpreters doing this testing for us. The COGAT test is one that's given for gifted and talented. In Carroll County, Maryland, we give this test in 2nd grade and then again in 6th grade. And so we talked a little bit about on Monday night just tracking students, and we're tracking starts, and why it's so important for teachers to become that advocate for students, because tracking starts in 3rd grade. After this COGAT test is given, after they've given some of their state assessments in 2nd grade, students start to become tracked into areas. And if we allow that tracking to persist with no one standing as the barrier there and as the gap, gap for that student. A lot of times these are students who could be misplaced for their entire educational career and not given opportunities that they deserve. The third tool for success, just kind of thinking about what should I do when there is a barrier with content. And I presented this option of keep versus sacrifice. You can see the suitcase on the left is like everything's important, we gotta shove it all in, we gotta take it all, as opposed to the suitcase on the right, which is very nicely folded, neatly put together, and not everything is there. As teachers, we need to decide what are the most important things that our students are going to be having in their brains that they're going to hold on to that will help them to move to the next level. Not everything is excessively important, no matter how much we love our content. We need to decide what are those things either that will bridge them to the next level of our content or will contain words and language that will help them to bridge into other content areas when we're considering keep versus sacrifice. Sorry, I'm in a very public place if you haven't heard. For those of you who weren't here on Monday night, I'm actually in Orlando, Florida at my daughter's volleyball competition, so I excuse all the noise. In addition to barriers with content, so whenever we're looking at actual assignments that you're going to be doing in the classroom, first thing, which is very important for helping students who are ELs or low-level learners or students who are having language difficulties, is to simplify language that surrounds the content vocabulary that you want them to know. So I've given an example over on the left that shows a government example that actually has very simplified language that's all around the content vocabulary, which is in bold. I've also added some images to help that. And you can see also just it's called the Freyer method, where you have the 4 boxes on my screen right here that actually shows images that will help students to engage with that language again and to hold it in their brains. I also want to really heavily stress formatting to make sure that you have a good white space, that not too many words are on a page. Whenever you're doing your PowerPoints, to make sure things are spread out. Bulleted things are very helpful. Numbered items are very helpful. So that the formatting isn't going to hold a student up or overwhelm a student. And of course, use no tricks. You use the same wording and images that you use whenever you're teaching on the test. We should not be trying to create more work for ourselves by finding different images or using different wording, but we should be going for what we taught them, because the more a student interacts with a word, the more a student interacts with a concept in the same way, the more likely they are going to be able to internalize it. And then, of course, looking at our gifted and talented students, to give them just a little bit more of an extend through scenarios. Give them options and ideas for how to figure out how the content vocabulary, the content idea plays out in modern world or in a different situation. And then I give this example also. It's called the big picture. And this is something that I use with ELs, but you can see where there's content vocabulary, and then the goal is for the student to put that content vocabulary into a picture so that they're going to be better able to remember what it means. And then finally, we did a little bit with online tools. And these are 5 online sites that I presented just as an option to help you all out. The PHET, the PHET site, is mostly STEM-based. It has simulations. Very engaging. I enjoy this one very much, and I use it with my students who are both ELs and gifted ELs. Number 2 is the Stanford History Educational Group. If you're a history major, history person, and you haven't gotten into this one yet, make sure you get into it. Go ahead and register yourself. You will not get spam emails for the rest of your life on this one, but it's very helpful whenever you're digging for modified information. So sometimes I'll go into the Stanford History Educational Group and I will start the work where they have ended it. So they have modified materials already for many of the major events in history, and then you can just start from there. They give 2 versions of the same exact documents in all of their lessons, so that you can have one for students who are at a higher level and one for students who need reduced language or reduced language complexity. UDL Studio is a place where you can go as a teacher to create new information for students. So I've used this to actually teach novels to students, where I've put my novels on these online sites where there's reduced language, where I can do a visual vocabulary pages and visual glossaries, and I can actually add language, I can add my voice to it. News ELA is news articles from all different genres, and this actually gives you the option of reducing lexile and changing lexile. And Symbaloo is a repository, a place where you can put multiple sites in one spot, so that students can find them easier, or just so you, as a teacher, can have all of your useful websites in one location. And then we had some discussion time. I will be posting this PowerPoint so that you can access those online pieces as you please. And that's your review of Monday night's class. Thank you.